I guess there's no pressure. You guys are expecting something brilliant, aren't you? First of all, congrats to all the Eagles fans out there. I have lived in the Philadelphia area like about half my life, maybe a little bit more than that. And while I root for the Eagles and I was happy last night, my heart is I'm a Steelers fan. I got to admit it. I heard some Steelers guys in the back talking earlier, so congrats to Eagles fans. I am happy, but not as happy as you are. Okay, so John sent me the piece of paper that he sent out for you guys, and kind of the first biblical reference is the story of the woman in the well. And so that's such a great story. It's actually the longest conversation recorded by Jesus with a single person in a single period of time. So I was excited to talk about that and bring something out of that. So my theme tonight is going to be about chance encounters that we all have, and take it a step further, but I think the challenge for us all is to make them more deliberate encounters. And so, as we'll talk about. So I'm going to read most of the passage and stop and comment a little bit, and then we'll kind of break it down a little bit. So basically, Jesus is on his way to Galilee. He stops in this town that doesn't exist anymore called Sychar. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that's how it sounds to me. And he's sitting at a well, and there came a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." Therefore the Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink, since I am a Samaritan woman?" So you got to get a little bit into the history here. I looked up kind of what would be the best comparison for kind of a Jew and a Samaritan to today's time. And what Google came back with was, Israel and Palestine. Yeah. So, or some of the sects within kind of Islam even have, like, they don't deal with each other. They don't talk to each other on the street. So when Jesus is sitting at this well and this Samaritan woman comes up to get water, the fact that they're even engaging in a conversation is basically kind of forbidden, or it's not done in today's culture. So here, Jesus, who's kind of, we know he's like one of the biggest rebels who ever lived, is starting out. And so she's like, "Wait a minute, how are you asking me for a drink of water?" Jesus answered her and said, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." So that's, to me, out of the blue. First of all, first thing he says is kind of crazy, kind of rebellious. "Give me, can I have a glass of water?" to somebody who, is basically an enemy in that time. And then she's kind of like, "Who are you to speak?" And then he kind of flips it again, and he says, "If you knew who you were talking to, you'd ask me for living water." Okay, if somebody said that to you, you'd be like, this person's kind of nuts, right? Yeah. She said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get this living water? You are not greater than our father Jacob, are you, who gave us the well and drank of it himself, and his son and his cattle?" Okay, so we got to pause here, another history lesson. She kind of throws in some knowledge. This is a famous well. Mm-hmm. Jacob used to be at this well. Jacob, and Joseph drank water, probably dug this well themselves. So this is kind of a famous well. She knows the history of this well. And it's kind of like, and she's saying, "You're no greater than Jacob," right? So he's kind of revealing himself a little bit. He kind of is like, "Okay, first of all, I'm going to talk to you when I shouldn't talk to you, or you think I shouldn't talk to you. Then I'm going to kind of flip the script and talk about, I can give you living water. I can give you this amazing gift, it sounds like. And then, and she's kind of like, "Well, who are you? Like, are you greater than Jacob? Like, what's going on here?" Right? So that's the picture. Jesus answered and said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will thirst again." He's talking about the physical water. "But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him shall never thirst. But the water that I will give him will become in him a well of water springing up to eternal life." So, I mean, again, you got to imagine what she's thinking here. But he, again, reveals a little bit more about what he's talking about. The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so I will not be thirsty, nor come all the way here to draw. So she's interested now. Okay, what is this water? Now you're on to something. I still don't exactly know who you are, but I like what you're talking about. And he says, another kind of right turn here from Jesus. He said, go call your husband and come here. Like, wait, what? What's going on? And the woman said, I have no husband. And Jesus, of course, knowing this, because he's Jesus, you have correctly said, I have no husband. So a little bit of a test maybe. Is she going to tell the truth? Is she going to lie to me? Or is she going to come clean? She tells the truth. And he says, you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. This you have said truly. Okay, so now we get a little bit more about the woman. She's had, it's not necessarily that she's necessarily a bad person for having 5 husbands. Older men married younger women back then, and so maybe a couple of her husbands had died naturally. So she's probably had a tough life. She may have made some bad choices within that. Who knows? We don't know. But, she's definitely had a sordid past. She's probably a little bit older in life, a little bit wiser. So Jesus pulls that out of her. So now Jesus is revealing something. Now he knows something about her, right? Like, this is weird. This is really weird conversation. The woman said to him, Sir, I perceive that you're a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and you people say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Jesus said to her, Woman, believe me, an hour is coming when neither in this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshiper will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people the Father seeks to be his worshipers. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. So that's a lot. I'm not going to unpack that comment. But again, he's kind of coming in with some really strong ideas. What's interesting that I think about this truth, the point where the worship Father in spirit and truth, is this whole conversation is them revealing truths to each other. She's getting to know who he is. At first, she doesn't even think he's worthy of Jacob. Then she's like, well, maybe you're a prophet, right? And he's revealing, and she's revealing about herself, her history, and the fact that she's a Samaritan. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, and he who is called Christ, when that one comes, he will declare all things to us. So she's aware of a Messiah that's going to come. She knows her history. She knows what's supposed to happen. Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. So there we have the full revelation of the conversation. I am the Christ. I am this Messiah that you are waiting for. And so now they fully realize each other. So skip ahead a little bit. So the woman left her water pot, didn't even get the water. So she leaves in a bit of a hurry, right? And went into the city and said to the men, come see a man who told me all these things that I have done. This is not the Christ, is it? So she's not maybe believing it. She's still trying to figure it out. They went out to the city and were coming to him. Skipping ahead, he has a conversation with his disciples. And then finally, from that city, many of the Samaritans believed in him because of the word of the woman who testified. He told me all the things that I have done. So when the Samaritans came to Jesus, they were asking him to stay with them. And he stayed there 2 days. Many more believed because of his word. And they were saying to the woman, it is no longer because of what you said that I believe, for we have heard ourselves and know that this one is indeed the Savior of the world. So that's the story of the woman in the well. Many lives were saved. Samaritans reaching out to a Jewish person and Jewish people at the well, the disciples, etc. So kind of a communal moment where people learn the truth and learn that Jesus is Lord and he is the Savior of the world. And it all starts from this sort of chance encounter of 2 people at a well, and one where they broke down the barriers of who's supposed to speak to who. So there's kind of 3 things I want to pull out of that story at a high level. One is there's these distinctions that we make in this world, and I am very guilty of judging somebody very quickly by how they look or what they do. And I try my best to love everybody as much as possible, but I fall into those traps of just judging right away based on how someone looks. And so here Jesus is really breaking that down right away and engaging in a conversation. The second thing is what I kind of already alluded to, which is they spent a bunch of time. Again, this is the longest conversation recorded. They spent a bunch of time getting to know each other and getting to the truth about who each other is. And that, I think, is also a model for us as we kind of break down exactly who we engage with, and we want to reveal as much truth about ourselves, and we want to find out as much truth about each other. And through that is where transformation comes. So in the end, we have transformed lives because these two strangers spent the time to understand each other. So at a high level, that's the model. So now I'm going to flip, and I'm going to tell a kind of a fun story about a chance encounter that I had. Hopefully you guys can think about some chance encounters you had in your life. So I had kind of a chance. First of all, I'm not trying to paint this in parallel with meeting Jesus or the woman at the well or anything like that. This is about half a life ago. I think I was in my late 20s. I'm now almost 52. So this is half a life ago. Memory's a little foggy. I was on a guy's trip in Montreal, and we kind of just picked different cities and went to them and saw baseball games and hung out before we all got kids and got married and all that stuff. And we went to, there was a little buzz in Montreal because the band, some of you might remember these guys, Iron Maiden and Motorhead. I heard you talking about a band back there, yeah. So the Black Sabbath you were mentioning, yeah, that's right. So Iron Maiden and Motorhead were in town in Montreal that night. And that was it. That's all we knew was that they were in town. We weren't going to the show or anything. But there was a crowd of people kind of going to the show, and we were actually at this Irish restaurant like around the corner from the venue. So we're there, and it's like 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night. I guess the show was letting out, and we were kind of at a standing table in the middle of the place. I don't know how many of us, half dozen of us, something like that. And there's a kind of an open standing table next to us. And again, I don't remember the exact time, but a bunch of kind of older guys kind of plopped at the table next to us. And one of my buddy goes, that's like Steve Harris from Iron Maiden, and like they're right next to us. And I listened to some Iron Maiden, but I wasn't the biggest. I'm not a metalhead really, and but I listened to them and stuff. I remember listening to them on the bus one time and stuff like that. So I didn't really know them, but so anyways, it was Steve Harris, the bassist, and then I think there was like the drummer, and then like some roadies and the manager were all kind of hanging out right next to us. Well, sooner or later we kind of merged. Like we start flowing into their table, they flow into our table, and we're chatting. And I find myself kind of in a one-on-one conversation with Steve Harris, the founding member of Iron Maiden. So we get, right? It's crazy. So, but what's crazy is that we talked for a long time. Like, he is an amazing guy. And I'll tell you, there was lines of people that would come up to them. So I'm having a conversation with them, and then somebody would come up to them from the restaurant and would say, your music means so much to me. What you've done, like I love you guys and all stuff. And they graciously, Steve Harris and the drummer graciously, individually talked with every single person that came up to them that night, shook their hand, said thank you very much. Like the most humble guys, really nice guys. And so I was talking with Steve Harris for, probably an hour or something like that, just intermittent with him, kind of talking to some other folks. And I asked him at one point, what's, with all the stuff that you've done, what's like your most prized accomplishment? And he said, my kids, without a doubt. And so we started talking about fatherhood and being on the road and trying to be with his kids. And we got into we were getting really understanding each other, revealing truths to each other. Like I just had this amazing opportunity to speak with a rock star and just hang out with him. And he was super humble and super willing to just engage with me on this very basic level about what it is to have kids and all this fun stuff. And so I don't know why he said this, but at the end of the night, he says to me, like kind of the last things we said to each other, he said, and I'm not married at this point, I don't have kids at this point, whatever. He says to me, you know what? You're going to be a great dad someday. And I was like, what? That's pretty cool of him to say. But something about what we talked about got us to know each other at a level where we kind of knew each other at with a little bit more detail. And him saying that, it's kind of strange, but it had an impact on me because it's like a famous rock star telling me you're going to be good at something someday, and you're kind of like, wow, maybe I will be good at something someday. Maybe that is a calling for me. I don't know. Like obviously, I had shared that I was excited to have kids someday, and I was looking forward to kind of realizing his dream, which like his most prized accomplishment, which was his kids. So anyways, that's my story, but there's some interesting parallels in that story. The first one, of course, is that famous people don't have to be coming out to a restaurant after the show. They could have stayed in their back room, hung out with the people they know and they're comfortable with, and then they could have gone back to the hotel room. But the fact that they came out and just started chatting with everyday people after their show, like broke down barriers and was pretty cool. Similar to how Jesus and the woman started chatting. Jesus didn't have to like go hang out at a well and pick up a conversation with anybody that walked by. He could have kind of huddled with his disciples who were off getting food. He could have hid from people, but he sought people out. Then the next thing is we chatted for a while. We got to know each other, and that revelation was ultimately impactful. So we spent time getting to know each other, and there was value in the relationship. And in the end, there was an impact, at least for me, probably not for him. I'm sure he doesn't remember it. But out of all that, there are parallels to these encounters. So that's my personal story. So I want to bring it back to kind of this notion of chance encounters. Look, I think the key is there's a couple of keys here, and I've said them, but I think they bear repeating, because I think it's really important to put our distinctions aside, not judge people right away, and in fact seek people out to have a conversation with, like Jesus sought the woman out at the well, and that Steve Harris went out at night knowing he was going to have communication with people because everyone was going to know who he was. So he came out and sought people out. I think we can seek people out and open up a dialogue with them and help transform both our lives and their lives. The second is, in those dialogues, reveal truth about yourself. Be honest with who you are. Try to understand who they are. And it's only then that you can really, really start to transform them and yourself through this revelation of truth. And then I want to kind of just touch on, I want to touch on this chance encounter sometimes. I think sometimes we all think of it as a chance encounter, but we can have an encounter with Jesus every day. And we talk about chance encounters. Sometimes Jesus is a chance encounter. Sometimes I'll go a day without thinking of him. Or when I get in trouble, then I'll reach out to Jesus when I've got something bad happening to me or something like that. But the reality is we all need to be more deliberate in our encounters with Jesus. He's here. He's ready to listen. He's ready to reveal himself to you. He wants you to reveal himself to you. And only through that interaction can we transform our life. We can't transform Jesus' lives, but he is there with love, ready for us to engage with him and encounter him. And so I think that's really ultimately where I kind of want to go. I think there's these ideas of chance encounters. We want to be deliberate with them, reach out to people more so than we do regularly, and specifically reach out as much as possible to Jesus to get to know him better and for him to get to know you as much as possible. And through that, we can transform both your lives and the lives of others. And that's all I wanted to say.